Now, next, it's time for a panel discussion to look at it from different perspectives. And we are starting out with a bang by looking right at the top. So today's panel will look at leadership, especially what traits constitute the right leader. With companies seeking new ways of working and doing business, we know leadership styles need to change. The leaders of the future need to be proficient across a broad set of characteristics, not just old ones, as well as new ones. But what are those? And how can today's leaders be tomorrow's leaders as well? Today, we have three participants joining me in this discussion. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Jaclyn Lee. She is the Chief Human Resources Officer for Singapore University of Technology and Design. Thanks for joining in, Jaclyn.
Hi, thank you.
And then we have Arun Kaimal, Human Resources Director for India, SEAK and ANZ at Cepheid at Danaher Corporation. I hope I got that right, Arun.
Yes, absolutely, you did. Glad to be here. Thank you, Winston. Thank you, team.
And also, let's welcome back. We have Jon Ingham, People and Organization Strategist at Strategic HR Academy. Thank you all. And let's start with some general questions. Where I talked about the great resignations of employee, and also we talked about maybe it's not great resignation, maybe it should be the great reckoning among employees. But we tend to look at it as employees. But leaders are also struggling. There is a high number of leaders who are leaving companies for a whole set of reasons. Usually the legal statement is for personal reasons. And there's a great many of them leaving recently. So maybe, Dr. Jaclyn, I would like to ask you, what are the challenges the leaders are facing in the past 12 to 20 months, which is unique?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for listening in. Well, as a HR leader myself, and also somebody who is also in charge of the COVID operations at the university, I've seen many trends in the last, 12 months that is really impacting the workplace. You see, as leaders, we're used to a mode of working where employees are in the office. We manage by kind of physical presence, right? So we are kind of suddenly thrown into a situation where employees have to work from home. Even in Singapore here, it's almost we have been working from home for the last 3 to 4 months. And then every time when we go back to the office, lockdown again, we have to come back home. So it's so destructive that leaders are finding it hard. It's a struggle to manage remote teams because you don't see your employees. It's very hard to build the camaraderie that you can do it when you see them physically. So how do you build the kind of employee camaraderie? How do you build employee belongingness? How do you build employee loyalty? How do you build employee commitment to the workplace and to the organization? When you can't even see them on a day-to-day basis, it's really a very big challenge. So a lot of leaders I know are having a difficult time, especially when you don't trust, right? You don't trust your employees. You don't know what they're doing, right? I know of a very big Japanese corporation. I shall not name the name of the organization. It's pretty draconian. They actually get their employees to lock down all their email activity on a weekly basis, and they have to submit that. So to check that they are online, they're working. So I think that's a bit draconian. I think as leaders, we need to empower and need to trust. In fact, now is the time for transformation. Now is the time where leaders have to rethink about new leadership models, the way they manage, the way they look at how to motivate their staff, and now the entire ball game has changed. This is just opening statement. I think I want to leave it to my co-panelists to maybe chip in, and then I will share a little bit more later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Arun, do you want to add on to that?
Sure, thanks, Winston, and thanks, Dr. Lee, for the opening comments. from my side, actually, I'm wanting to present an alternate perspective, just so I know we're able to have that dialogue and healthy debate on this call or on this session today. So I'm looking at the Great Resignation as an opportunity, as a opportunity for the Great Attraction, as McKinsey is calling it now. Because if somebody is leaving a job, then he or she is also getting a new job at some other place. So I'm kind of positioning it from the other side to say that the last 2 years did stretch everybody. Like, we were all in the same storm, different boats. But how are we coming off it now? Because 2 years is a long time. People have gotten used to the new normal. In many countries, before the Omicron virus, we were actually thinking of, return back to work. So for 2 years, associates were working from home. But starting January, like in Singapore, where the government said that, or the MOM said that people could come back to work, the ART, the weekly regime, might not be, as required, because starting first, things were beginning to open up. But then suddenly you have Omicron, coming in. So what we are discussing internally now is that this state of fluidity is the new normal. So that whole state of coming back to a new normal where people come back to work fully might never come. So at our organization, what we've done, we've articulated this as a future of work. And when we say future of work, all the roles in the organization have got designated as remote, hybrid, or on-site. And the percentage of on-site roles is very few. If you are on a shop floor and you're going to work with the in a lab or a production facility, then your need to come to the office is much higher. But if you are in a job which does not require you to be in office, then we have provided that flexibility to our associates to say that even when things are seeming to be normal, you have the flexibility to be either remote or hybrid. So with that in mind, as a if you look at this, it's the work, the workforce, and the workplace, right? The three elements that need to be planned around, or need to be catered for. So the work itself has been established now over the last 18 months that many pieces of work can be done remotely. The workforce is still getting used to what this means, and the workplace is still question mark, because the new workplace could be home, could be a mix of home and office, or for some, like if you look at our Grab drivers or delivery professionals in that space, then for them not much has changed. Even during COVID, they kept going out in the morning. Probably they had to take extra precaution, but still keep doing the work. So I would say this state of fluidity has prolonged, and just when things started to appear a little more normal, the new surprise came in. So from our side, what we're saying is, for leaders, it's extremely critical that we keep being comfortable with becoming uncomfortable and make that a habit. Do what is required for the near term, keep the long term in mind, but do what is required to keep you afloat and keep you moving forward in the right direction. Pace is not as necessary today, but direction is. So what we're saying, people, is keep moving in the right direction. If you have to go down a little, go slow to go fast, that's okay. But that's the way we are approaching this. Just my opening comments. I'll come in with some examples as I go along in this session.
Sure, thanks, Arun. And before I go to John, because John is really ready to jump into the conversation, and when we even saw him disappear out of the screen for a while, that's fine. But I would like to go to Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee, you mentioned in your opening remarks that it's about trust at the end of the day. Now, trust is a two-way street. Employees themselves do not want employers to be too intrusive, but yet employers schooled in the old ways of management have to be intrusive if they want to use the new management style. So what's going on there? How's that tussle going on between the employee and employers?
I mean, that's a good question. This is something that's of course happening. You see this phenomenon more prominently now, I think, in the past, because most of us are in this other mode where we're in the office, right? So now that we're thrown into remote work, less progressive organizations, I'm beginning to have this paradigm shift that if I don't see the employee, I need to know that, or have confidence that the job will be delivered. So the old style of management is I need to see you and make sure that you clock in at 9, go back home at 5 o'clock. But now the new leadership models have changed, right? So the leaders, definitely on the one hand have to go through a mindset, is a transformation. In the new leadership models, no more micromanaging. It is hard to keep a close eye on employees. Trust is going to be essential part of mindset change in leaders. So leaders have to go through this transformation and have to build the kind of trust. Performance is not going to be measured by results, or not going to measure by time work, but by results. And I think flexibility is the key. Leaders now have to kind of transform their minds to think that as long as my employees are delivering results, it really does not matter what time of the day they are performing their job functions. So what if they wake up at 10 o'clock? They have to take their parents for a medical checkup and they come back at 11 o'clock. And then they get their job done, but they stay back till maybe 7, 8 o'clock. It doesn't matter, right? As long as the job gets done. And so, and now the model has changed that leaders have to also think about becoming mentors. You're there not as a gatekeeper, as a guardian, as a guardian angel to guard over your employees, but you got to basically just empower, empower and trust and just be there as a mentor, because many people are struggling right now. The great resignation, I've seen resignation spike up in my workplace too, and people are taking this opportunity to really change their environment. People want to do something new, so you see that the resignation is spiking. And so more so if you do not embrace a new way of work and rethink about a new leadership model, this kind of resignation is going to continue, and it's a war for talent right now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Jon, you have heard so far from our two panelists. What are your thoughts so far in terms of the struggle that leaders face, in terms of managing employees, as well as new leadership models, which we are still experimenting and may not even work with the employees, and it could be even specific to the cultures or even countries?
Oh, definitely, absolutely. Yeah, undoubtedly. Well, okay, let's start with that bit. So I think different national cultures are very different. Leadership in Asia generally is different from the UK or Europe and so on. But then, each country and then, different regions within different countries within Asia are different as well. And, different people lead, different people like to be led in different ways, different generations, different age and so on. And there are so many differences that we need to respond to. That's one of the key reasons why I think this shift towards personalization is so important. Leadership needs to be an individual relationship, and therefore the key determinant is the individual that you're trying to lead, or you're trying to influence, and the type of person that they are. And I think that was sort of my answer to that part. In terms of the bigger question, whenever I listen, generally, most HR practitioners that I listen to, I'm just in complete awe really of what has been achieved over the last couple of years. So, as a consultant, it's so easy to sort of gloss over all of that, but wow, we're still here, we're still in business. We shouldn't sniff at what we've achieved. So absolutely, leadership to this point has had to focus on the practicalities of how we stay in business, and very practical, pragmatic, short-term responses to remote and office-based working and so on. But clearly we can't go on forever in that sort of reactive way. So I think this this event comes at an absolutely appropriate time that the pandemic hasn't finished, and there are now opportunities to start thinking long term, and we really do need to do so. And absolutely, points like trust are going to be totally key. I thought, Jaclyn, it was interesting hearing you talk about, increasing that focus on trust, And yes, you know, business leaders will always be measured on the results that they achieve. And to me, that was a sort of demonstration of the paradox I was talking about before, that we need to find ways of doing those two things and not seeing them as a balance or a trade-off, but, you know, investing in those trustful relationships, knowing that that's going to lead to, you know, to better business results in the longer term. But for many, many leaders, that's a complete change of sort of focus. You know, I mean, so many leaders see the people leadership part of their jobs as what they sort of fit in after they've done everything else. And I just don't think that's sustainable today. You know, you can manage all different parts of the business. You can manage the finances and manage the information and manage the operations and so on. And I know people talk about leading a business, but, you know, that's sort of managing the different parts and strategy. And these days, more and more people can sort of get involved in strategy as well. So, you know, leading a business is really leading the people in a business. Leadership is it's a people activity. And I'm not sure all leaders necessarily recognize that, or even all HR people have thought through sort of what that means about the people that we select and promote into leadership type positions. You know, the way that we've tended in the past to sort of promote up good technical experts and sort of say, oh, you can be a leader now. No, you know, we can't do that anymore. We've got to change.
Thanks, John. I think that was an interesting point. I'll pick on that right at the end of this discussion. But quickly, I just wanted to see, you mentioned about a lot of leaders being, well, judged by their financial performance. Regulators have very strict rules of what leaders need to do in terms of financial performance. There are guardrails down there, but when it comes to people management, the guardrails are not that clear, and it becomes a personal contract between the HR, the company, and the individual, where then maybe in terms of Singapore Ministry of Manpower needs to come in when it comes to a complaint, but it is an organization before you go to the leader. Should there be guardrails right at the top for leaders when it comes to how they are going to do the transition for people management, or as you mentioned, yeah, people-centric management?
Yes, but I think they need to be fairly soft guardrails. Well, you were talking right at the beginning about, you know, examples of organizations snooping on their people, and, you know, we don't want to do that on our managers any more than we want to on other employees. Yeah, we need to trust managers to manage if they're going to trust their people to work. But at the same time, you need systems to ensure that things are being done. I think the sort of behind this, and again, this isn't something that's new because of the pandemic, but for a period of time, we've been seeing a shift from a sort of mechanistic way of organizing to a much more sort of organic, emergent type of approach. And very often in lots of different areas of organization and HR, the organic emergent approaches work better because they are more human, but the risk is they just don't happen at all. So I think, yes, you need the guardrails, but the more that we can make the culture the guardrail rather than sort of hard bureaucratic systems, you know, so much the better. We've sort of got to move that way.
Okay, then thanks. Sorry to put you on the spot, by the way, John. Arun, you mentioned about examples as well as how leadership has to change and are changing. I'm looking at organizational structures. The reason why the organizational structure is organizational structure that we see today is because leaders, especially those at the top, have two major audiences. Those, their customers, and nowadays employees also their customers, and their shareholders, so they can be responsible for that. Do you think organizational structure can get in the way?
No, Absolutely, Vincent. Maybe I'll just take 30 seconds to respond to your earlier comment on guardrails. I would like to quote the example of Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors. When she came into the role, and sometime down the line, associates were talking about the dress code policy. She replaced a 14-pager dress code policy with 2 words, which was dress appropriately. And I think that kind of sums up my thinking around, why we need to rely more on people, empowering them, like what Jon said, because these guardrails were probably reminiscences from the past. In a manufacturing line where discipline was the key, it had to have a same set of rules for everybody. But today, when we look at creativity and innovation as the key drivers for growth, then putting those old school policies will have limited value. So just a quick response there, adding to what Jon said, completely in agreement. To your question about structures, Winston, in my mind, structure always follows strategy. So you cannot have, a strategy that you're forming on the basis of a structure, but it's always the other way around. At least that's what's commonly seen in the industry. Now, if I look at the 3 stakeholders that you said 2, I'll include the third one, but customers, shareholders, and associates, the 3 buckets that I can think of. I think somewhere the CEO and the leaders really need to start with thinking about the shareholders first, to say that, how do I create value? And once you start having that goal in mind, and it's not just shareholders who are investing money, but it's people who are linked to you, stakeholders. ESG is today such an important part of a CEO or a top leader's agenda. So you can't think myopically about just maximizing wealth. But the triple bottom line, is probably something that I would like to quote here and say that the CEO really needs to cater to the planet, people, and profits. And it has to be, in that order maybe. But then that's the first thing. So organizations need to start looking at what businesses will be futuristic and will help them to deliver that value sustainably over a period of time. And once that strategy becomes clear, you need to then align your organization to say, okay, like if I'm a tobacco company and I'm saying, I'm dreaming of a smokeless world, then what is it that the new businesses are? Is it EV? I don't know. Maybe it's electricity. And then how can I pivot my org structure to follow that strategy? That's what I would say, Winston, as my 2 cents to your question. But it's a very dynamic world and things are changing so rapidly. Even strategy is changing. I remember when I was in college, we used to talk about Shell and the scenario planning, where we used to talk about 5-year plans, 7-year plans, and those used to be the norms. Then as I started entering the workforce, it became 3-year plans. After COVID, it's 3-month plans. Every quarter, you need to have a plan that it kind of takes you through the quarter. While you don't forget the long term, but the near term is becoming much more dynamic, and therefore you have to keep agility at your end, keep changing. I hope that answers in some way.
And it's not just 3-year plan, it's 3-year plan A, 3-year plan B, and 3-year plan C.
Yep.
In the world that we live in. Dr. Lee, I'm just looking at what a term that Arun talked about in terms of TBL framework, and where people are looking at ESG data, we are looking at society alignment, and as well as financial. So these are the 3 areas. So how do you actually motivate today's leaders who are already in leadership positions to actually switch their thinking towards adopting a TBL framework? Is there like a training that they needed to go to, or is there some other ways and means to actually nurture them?
I think along with all my co-panelists, and I think the essential elements, if you look at, whole organizational strategy is really, because I'm a culture person, I do a lot of work in culture. It is actually necessary to do culture transformation. If you can put all these people through training session, you can put them through all kinds of like re-engineering of processes and put them through all kinds of techniques and methods. But if the mind, if you can't get them to agree that this is going to be the way moving forward, and they have to align with what is good for the organization, and leaders have to be convicted and they need to believe that the organization, the values of the organization, and these are the right things to do. So in our university, we have actually in the last 12 months, really two major shifts in our strategy as an educational institution. We don't just impact students, but we impact society, because we do a lot of fundamental research, and the work we do impacts the people around us, organizations, and environment, because we do a lot of work in environmental sustainability. So one of the first pieces that I always start with is I start with get them to think about, why are you here in this organization? I work with my leaders to ask them to think about how do you align, to this kind of strategy that we want? How do you align the culture? How do you work? How do we change our value system, right? So we do a lot of brainstorming exercises. We get our leaders into a room, and I get them to think about the value proposition, culture, the future state you want to be, and what's our current state. And then we do a gap analysis. And from there, we look at the gaps, and we don't stop there. We say that, look, you got to own the gaps. It does not belong to just the employees, but as leaders, we must drive the gap. So I get them into work teams. So we identify maybe amongst us the top 10 gaps. And the gaps are not just like soft gaps. It could be, in order to transform culture, there's structural gaps that need to be closed. So some are relating to the way we organize, some are relating to the way we work, some are relating to the environment. So we try and look at the gaps, and I get each leader to own at least one or two gaps, and they drive a work team to close those gaps. And so once you get them to own it and to drive it, they see a sense of ownership, and it has been quite effective, this method of doing. And we get together, for brainstorming session, perhaps very regularly in our work teams. Once a month, we have different types of work streams, and get together to see our progress. And so it's a lot of cross collaboration. The new world of work, you can't survive alone. You really have to collaborate across, and we believe in a very multidisciplinary approach to problem solving, cross collaboration, because not everybody has the skill set. So in leadership, in building this kind of data-driven culture, this kind of change in mindset, I tend to like to use this kind of approach that promotes ownership and get people to come up with the solutions themselves, the leaders themselves. Then they have the ownership to drive the changes that's needed in the organization. Hope that answers. Thank you.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I'd like to go to some of the questions that is now popping up in the Q&A, and thanks for everyone for sending in the questions. Great questions so far. I'd like to look at what Dr. Lee was talking about in terms of dealing strategically, administratively, but here we are talking about gender liberalization, and how, instead of saying how the organization is dealing with it, I would like to ask Dr. Lee to expand on the answer on how a leader can deal with gender liberalization, because it's a huge hot topic that is right across the world.
Okay, so for us, we have as an organization, we have been promoting gender diversity quite aggressively. So we are a technology university. It's hardcore technology, but we have a student ratio of 41%. So in an engineering school, can you imagine 41% of our students are females? So this is something that has been purposeful. It's not something that happened overnight. So we do a lot of work to promote gender diversity. So, for example, we will get our female faculty to be ambassadors. We run workshops for women in technology. We do a lot of campaigns to promote the inventions that women have made in history towards engineering. And of course, as a university, we try and promote the kind of diversity in the way we hire. So for example, in the computer sciences, we try and bring in a lot more females, and we feature our female faculty a lot more prominent. So this year, in fact, 3 or 4 of our female faculty got into the top 100 women and our list of women in technology in our Singapore list. So we're very proud of them. So gender diversity and gender liberalization is something that is purposeful. It takes years, it's not something that's overnight. It has to be in your programs, it has to be in your culture, it has to be in everything you do, you know, in the way you speak, the way your organization is represented by women. It's about really getting our women to rise up, you know, featuring our women who can thrive in a male-dominated world. You know? And we have proven quite successfully in the way our female ratio is 41%. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lee. Arun, what about yourself in terms of gender liberalization? Because especially some people might be uncomfortable if, let's say, somebody says like, I'm out of my closet, I'm somebody else, please do address me in that way. And there are certain nuances that some people might not be comfortable with. How do you actually deal with that? And where does leadership come in to make sure that people are comfortable?
Sure. So thanks, Winston. And first of all, compliments to Dr. Lee. I think that's a very nice percentage, 41%, you know. It's always good to see conscious efforts being taken to be more representative of the world outside in the world inside. So that's our aim as well at Danaher, to say that how do we as an organization try to create a workforce that represents the demographics that we see outside. So if we go outside, you know, we meet, say, people who are from LGBTQ or different communities, do we create a safe space for them inside to be who they are? That's our, you know, broad philosophy. And to your question, Winston, it is not easy, right? Everybody has a sense of identity, which is built on their experiences, environment, and education. The 3 E's, as I would like to call them: education, experience, and environment. And suddenly, you know, somebody's coming and telling you, you have to be comfortable with LGBTQ, you know, working in the same workspace as you. In some countries, by law, there could be some restrictions, you know, or things that are not truly in that spirit. So what we are telling as an organization to our colleagues is that we respect you as you are. We are not asking you to change. However, when you go to the US, we are a multinational company. You may go to US, you know, for a visit tomorrow, and it is quite possible that you will have people who are a little different than what you are, what your choices are, what your preferences are. How do you respect them? Ideally, we would want you to embrace them, be comfortable with them, treat them with respect, treat them with, treat them with that same affection that you would any other colleague. But if you're not able to get to that level, because it's an evolution, you can't say it's like a switch. One day you become an ally, and then tomorrow you're supposed to embrace them. It's a journey for people. Some people get there faster, some people take more time. But what we're saying is, ideally, we would want everybody to be an ally in the service of humanity. Treat people as you would like to be treated yourself. And if you can't be an ally, at least give them the respect that they deserve. Don't discriminate. Don't try to have these boundaries that kind of differentiate us versus them. I come from India, where there's a very beautiful saying in one of our old scriptures called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The meaning of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is the whole world is one family. I think it's time that we start looking at people, with the same eye, try to reduce barriers. Because if you come to think about it, it's not just a way the world is moving on the social media and other places, but economically also it's a necessity. There's more interdependence today. There's more need for collaboration. Like the pandemic that we're facing now, if one country decides, like South Africa, I'm just talking about a topical issue here, but South Africa probably called it out first, before anybody else. But suddenly, if they would not have done that, the impact would have been much worse. So today, maybe the repercussions are being felt adversely by a country because they called it out first. But had they not done it, probably the impact would have been much worse off. So we really need to think about how we can embrace, people with different opinions, different preferences, gender in particular, and respect them, give them that, safe space. I'm not saying that everybody has to be an ally, but at least try to broaden your scope, increase your acceptance is what I would say. That's what we are doing.
Thanks, Arun. And Jon, your input, your wisdom to this discussion on gender equality and gender liberalization.
I thought both Jaclyn and Arun replied brilliantly. It's about respect for the other person and accepting their beliefs and values and adjusting to that. Not imposing our own views, whatever they may be, but valuing the other person for themselves.
That's quite difficult. Let's say if you're in a work environment which is very driven for performance, and people are very pigeonhole minded, saying that this is the kind of traits or characters that we need to push it forward, right? So how do you actually break down that kind of thinking and saying that maybe you should look at it from different angles, and maybe the sum is better than the whole is better than individual parts?
We all need to recognize that the world has changed, not necessarily just because of the pandemic in the last couple of years, but this has been one of those trends which has been underway for some time and has accelerated forward. The way that some people used to live and manage isn't appropriate for the world that we're in, and it's helping everybody understand that. It does need to be raised and dealt with at a level that perhaps wouldn't have been done before. But we now understand the importance of these issues, for our organizations as well as for the individuals. And we know that individuals and the organization won't be effective unless people do respect each other. So it's just so fundamental. It has to happen.
Thank you, John.
Winston,
Yes.
can I just have one point that I want to emphasize?
Sure.
I think there's one segment of the population in terms of that I think we need to kind of think about is really people with special needs and disabilities. So, it's not just about gender, about LGBTQ, and also it's really about special needs. So in Singapore, recently, we have been talking a lot about fair workplace practices, and the government is actually coming up with legislation to look at fair workplace practices. And what is heartening is that we are seeing that people with autism, people with disabilities are gradually being given opportunities to be at the workplace. So recently, our university opened up internship places for people with autism, to come in and understudy different segments of our departments. And that was really very heartwarming, because we see our employees supervising and mentoring people with special needs, giving them the skills, and even training students from probably less well-known people who are from more disadvantaged environment in special skills like cybersecurity. So I think this is we're living in a world that has to be inclusive of everybody, including people with special conditions and disabilities. I wanted to bring that point in. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Lee, and that was a great point. We have like around 2 to 3 minutes to end this discussion, so I'll save the best question to the last. Maybe I'll start with Arun. So what happens if an organization finds itself with the wrong leader? What are the processes that you have in terms of HR to actually address such a situation?
Sure. Yeah, and as much as you would like to make the predictability high for getting the right person in, there are always instances where you get somebody who's not really the best person in the role. In that situation, first is to be honest, like what Dr. Lee also said. Trust and transparency are critical. Just being honest upfront and saying, hey, look, things are not working out the way we want it to, and letting the person know, that's basic, so that the individual is not taken by surprise if you are kind of heading towards a separation eventually. So first is be transparent, have that open communication, let the person know. Second is give the person a chance, because sometimes people realize that they've probably gone down the wrong path and they want to come back and start that journey over again. So if you have the benefit of time, and if there is some flexibility in terms of no immediate need, so give that person time to come back. Give that person a fair opportunity, maybe performance improvement plan, a coaching plan, both probably could be good ways to start. But third, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Even Jack Dorsey stepped down when he felt that, hey, this organization is probably better managed by somebody else. We've seen that earlier with Apple, we've seen that with Microsoft, multiple organizations, where at some point in time leadership change is inevitable. When is a question, and how? Those are the two areas where HR can play a very critical role to make it fair, make it respectable, and make it make it a win-win situation for all. There are some compromises everybody will have to make, but coming on a high horse and saying, hey, you are out, might be, thing of the past. In today's world, it has to be mutual, it has to be conversational, it has to be agreeable to both. But yeah, sometimes you have to cut your losses. If you've tried the development part, things are not working out, then maybe, a separation is also not a bad thing after all, at the end. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Arun. And Dr. Lee, your last words in terms of what Arun has just mentioned.
Yeah, I think Arun has summarized most of the key points. We take a softer approach, counseling, mentoring, trying to work through the weaknesses. I also tend to want to use, I normally do, when I hire people in senior leadership positions, we do a very thorough assessment, put them through a very thorough test. We go through their strengths and weaknesses, and we actually do that at the beginning so that we are quite clear that we're putting the right person as much as we can. And those tools are very useful for mentoring and counseling in the future. But I mean, to add on to what Arun has said, it is true that eventually you can try all means, but eventually you still have to perform. It doesn't work out, then we need to find a way to move the person to another department or to really have to transit the person out. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. And Jon, quick words, 1 minute of summary of what you have just heard.
Well, I mean, all great points, and I think just reinforce. When I was asked to respond to the agenda that you put forward, I mean, clearly this sort of more people-centric approach is something which is is being discussed in all organisations and across HR these days. I hadn't realised it would come out quite as strongly as it has. So I just think if anybody was doubting, perhaps when I was talking about the keynote about the strength and the importance of a more people-centric agenda, just listen to the conversation we're having. Business is about people. Business problems are about people problems. We have to get into this territory.
Thank you. And first of all, thanks to all our panelists. I think we had a great discussion. We had lots of points, and I think we can continue this conversation for another 1 hour. But I don't think so. We have time for those kind of things. So again, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And thanks, Jon, for beaming all the way from UK.